Ahead of tonight's speech, the White House hosted a lunch with news anchors. CBS Evening News anchor Jeff Glor spoke with the president about his goals to unify the country.
From a tremendous divisiveness, which has taken place not just over 1 year, over many years, including the Bush years, not just Obama. You go back to the Bush years. You go back to the Clinton years. You take a look at that impeachment of Bill Clinton. I actually asked a long-time senator, happened to be a Democrat, is this the worst you've ever seen it? He said, absolutely not. During the impeachment of Bill Clinton was much worse than this. So many of you are too young to remember that. I feel too young to remember, but I guess I'm not. But there's been tremendous divisiveness, not in the last year. There's been tremendous divisiveness for many years. I would consider it a great achievement if we could make our country united, if I could unite the country. That's not an easy thing to do because the views are so divergent. You know,
how do you get there?
As an example, one group wants free health care paid by the government, another group, all good people. Another group wants health care paid, by private, where there's great competition and you pay very little and you get better health care. Everybody is a good person, but they have really divergent views. So there's a question whether or not can you bring that together, or do you just win every 4 years? Somebody wins one way or the other, and they have. But just, David, just to say, I would love to be able to bring back our country into a great form of unity. Without a major event where people pull together, that's hard to do. But I'd like to do it without that major event, because usually that major event is not a good thing. I would love to do it.
That was President Trump. You see the White House shot there. He was meeting with news anchors ahead of the State of the Union. Our Jeff Glor was there. He joins us now by the phone from Washington. Jeff, what else did the president say?
Well, most of the lunch was off the record for some guidance, but it was interesting this portion where he did speak on the record and talked about what he thought he might try to do, and as you heard, he talked about the country sometimes only he believes comes together when bad things happen, and I think he said he'd like to try to do that, and he didn't want a bad thing to happen. He'd like to try to do that without that. But you're going to hear more about immigration tonight, more about the economy, more about the markets. The president was upbeat at this lunch. I think he is using in part as his guide some of the confidence he may or may not have picked up in the joint the address of the joint session of Congress last February, which was not a State of the Union, of course, but was his first sort of speech in that setting. And I think he has said in the past that I think he felt as though he performed well in that setting. So if you talk to some in the White House, I think they will also point to the speech he gave at Davos, which was a little more somber, but they felt that it was effective and it worked, and it wouldn't be surprising to see a little more of that tonight.
Jeff, you mentioned immigration. Was he optimistic that his framework could make it through the House?
There are some folks, just talking to folks on the Hill here, there are some who feel that progress is being made behind the scenes, that there was some progress made yesterday as well, before we deal with the next government deadline, which is next Thursday night, and then the DACA deadline, which potentially is March, but there's legal cases going on as well. I think that there's interest on both sides in getting a big comprehensive deal done, not from everyone necessarily. The question I think right now is, did the last shutdown that ended after 3 days, did that create more of an impetus to get a deal done, or did that just dig everyone in more and make it even more complicated to get a deal done. I think even though progress there may be some progress being made on some of the particulars, there's also some who feel that there's not an enormous incentive on either side to get anything done before midterms.
Mm-hmm. And on the FISA memo that we know that the House Intel Committee has decided that they're going to reach, did the president say anything about his feelings on that?
No, I think you talk to some Republicans on the Hill feel that that FISA powers need to be looked into, and that under the wrong circumstances they can be abused. I talked to a few folks today and said, well, do you feel that happened in this particular case when it came to the FBI? And they're like, I'm not saying that, but they feel that the FBI has to be as transparent as possible with everything. I think as you continue to see more on this and more in the Mueller investigation, the politicizing of all of this, I would not be surprised if that only increases as we move forward.
All right, Jeff, we look forward to your coverage tonight. CBS Evening News anchor Jeff Glor, who had an opportunity with other news anchors to sit down with President Trump ahead of the State of the Union. Thank you, Jeff.
Okay, Rena, thanks.